this episode, I quizzed the rules guru, Matt Egar, about movement in combat as we unpick all the varying ideas, concepts, and rules. Welcome to the Mythras Matters podcast, Season 1, Episode 76, Gait, Charging and Moving in Combat. Hello and welcome to Mythras Matters, a podcast dedicated to the Mythras rule set and all its supplements. As always, I'm your host, Inwils, and welcome to December. Ding dong merrily on high. Christmas is on its way. So I've made the decision not to spend a huge amount of time chatting before we get to the main segment of this episode. I was really pleased when Matt got in touch with me to talk about movement in combat. I have to admit that I've been avoiding talking about this topic for some time. This is because, well, truth be told, I don't fully understand it. And because we play a range of different rule sets, I've wanted to choose a rule that we can apply to all our campaigns from Mythras to Destined. So let's get on with it, and I'll let Matt introduce himself so we can start to explore movement in combat.
Sure. I'm Matt E. of Old Bones Publishing. You can find our kiosk on Drive-Thru RPG, and you can find me on the Mythras Discord.
Fantastic. And you have come along today as the rules guru. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, we'll see how ably I fulfill that role or don't.
Well, I have to say, one of the topics that has really stumped me in the past has been movement in combat, what to do with it, how it works. So I'm really appreciative that we're having this discussion, and hopefully I'll get lots of pointers for my game when we start playing again. So let's start right at the beginning. What do the rules? What does the core rules say about movement in combat?
All right. So in the core rules, one of the actions, proactive actions that you can do when it's your turn in a cycle. You should know what all those words mean, right? Because that's important. Yes. Right. A round is made of cycles, and in a given cycle, you get one turn to make a proactive action, right?
Yeah.
So on your turn, one of the actions you can do, in addition to attack and cast magic and whatever, is move. All right. So let me read the first part of the move action. Okay.
Nice.
Provided he is not engaged with an opponent. Pause. So this creates the impression that when you're engaged with somebody, you may not move freely.
Yeah.
That's correct. Almost.
Oh, no.
One of the subtleties that we have brought out on the Mythras Discord is that it's important to remember that, think about any action movie you've ever seen. They're called action movies for a reason. These are called combat actions for a reason. These characters aren't statues. They're not standing perfectly still, and they do move a little bit here and there. Yeah. And at that level of detail, we should probably not worry about it and just, cover it with narrative sugar as the GM or whatever to make it seem fun and kind of realistic.
Yeah.
that's not stated anywhere directly in the rules. It's kind of inferred or stated indirectly in a couple places. So I wanted to bring that out up front. Now, on the other hand, when we get to it later, the rules for tactical combat in the Mythras Companion do a much better job of pointing out that it's closer to the truth to realize that these characters are always in motion.
Yeah.
And that anything else is an exception to the general state. So there's a different point of view between the two books. And
right.
All right. So there's my first interjection. All right. Move. Provided he is not engaged with an opponent, the character can move any distance the game master deems suitable for the situation. The move combat action is not required for every instance of movement during combat. Okay. So now let's do that second sentence. Not required for every instance of movement. There are some small movements, what I call, in my words, incidental movement.
Okay.
That your character makes just, and again, covered narratively, not necessarily meant to be covered by measuring millimeters on a grid. Your GM just says, oh, okay, you can do this, and you move your figurine a little. That's all. If you're not using theater of the mind. You don't have to pay for every little thing you do with a move action. And that is the part that implies, although it's phrased in a confusing manner to many people, that's the part that implies that you don't always need to pay for little movements. Now, something we talked about in off screen, so to speak, before we got together, you pointed out the fact that in the Destined rules for combat, there's a free action called Quick Move.
Yeah.
Quick Move lets you move up to 1/3 your normal move rate for free. It's a free action.
Yes.
As long as you're not taking move as your actual action
correct.
That cycle. So they tried to encode it a little more clearly in the actual rules of Destined, which was kind of a chance to revisit how combat worked in a new context for superheroes. So that's how they handled it there. Now, once again, the Mythras Companion, which we'll be talking about later, handles it completely differently. So we're still on the core rules.
Yeah,
we're still on the core rules.
Yeah.
So there's another part that we just read, and it says the character can move any distance the game's master deems suitable for the situation. So, all right.
This is the interesting bit that I find interesting now. Yeah.
This is again rather vague. Rule 0 or Rule 0.5 between Rule 0 and Rule 1. Rule 0 is the rule of fun, right?
Yeah.
Rule 0.5 is the GM runs the game, and whatever the GM says goes.
Yeah.
So this statement here, any distance the game's master deems suitable, is just one of the many instances of that fundamental rule that comes before all the normal ones. And so what I think they could have said a little more clearly there is that, may move any reasonable distance, based on their character's move rate and gait that they chose.
Yes.
That's how the game master will decide what's reasonable in that situation, by using the rules about movement, which are in the game system chapter, right?
Yes.
So it sounded like maybe you had a question.
I was just going to, I thought you probably come on to this, but there is this, when we first started to play Mythras, and please do not laugh at this, we didn't realize that you could move and engage in combat. Yes. So all the characters, all the players would not do the first move into combat, because they felt that they would move into combat, and then I, as the monster or the opponent, would get a free hit on them.
Right, exactly. So nobody moves first. Nobody ever does combat. Right. Yeah. There's never any combat in Mythras, obviously.
Yeah, everybody just stands ready.
Right. The combat chapter is 20 pages long, but there's no combat in Mythras because no one can engage, right? No one in his right mind would start. Yeah.
Yeah. But you can move and engage, can't you? With one action point. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to pay for it separately. You don't have to worry about the other guy getting to attack you first, because that's what causes this whole problem. There's this fear that, oh, I've taken my action. It was a move. Now I'm engaged, but I can't actually swing my sword yet. And my opponent is going to get the first strike because their next turn is going to come before mine does.
Yeah.
In many cases.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's not how it's supposed to work.
No. And we had to, we were very pleased when we worked that out, and then everybody was, I think I actually emailed Lawrence and he told me, because combat was becoming not happening. So I am interested in the phrase about being in combat or engaged in combat.
Engagement.
Yeah, because say, for example, there's a spellcaster that is firing at range.
That's a ranged attack.
Yeah. So can they freely move, or are they engaged with an opponent casting spells?
This is something that I kind of fudged in my head for a long time until someone said something to me and it clicked. Engagement is a close combat concept. It is not a ranged combat concept. So spellcasters are not restricted, or archers or whatever are not restricted in their movement in general, although there are some rules. If you're attacking at range, you can move more freely than someone who is in the condition of being engaged, has engagement in hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah.
Now, once again, these people aren't statues. The people who are engaged in hand-to-hand combat are moving a little bit. That's what I call incidental movement, and you don't have to worry about it. Occasionally, especially if you have a battle map in front of you and you can see a physical barrier, like the edge of a cliff or a wall or something like that, then you can say, oh, they're running out of space to move. Maybe they're going to get stuck in a corner or something. Yeah. But that is very situational, and you can address that in different ways. In general, you're not supposed to worry about the little bits of movement that happen by accident as people just, try to get the right position to drive their knife home or whatever. That's normal. Now, let me click ahead just a little bit. I have my big screen open.
Yeah, so bigger.
Yes, I do.
I was going to ask, so when we say somebody can move and engage, that is referring to engagement being melee combat, hand to hand, getting in there, rather than moving and then whacking off a spell and engaging that way. Or can they do that?
You can, depending
You're going to
on,
hate me at the end of this,
no,
Matt.
That's okay. The usual, I'm trying not to mix together the stuff that's in the companion with the stuff that's in the core book now. So normally you can do stuff like spell casting at no faster than a gait of walking, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So we're going to have to talk about what movement gait means, movement and movement gait, right? Outside of combat also.
Yeah.
So let's do that next. But yeah, if you're a spellcaster, you can walk and fire a spell. You can stand still and fire a spell. But normally, if you want to run or sprint I think that's disallowed, at least for most spells. I'm not sure.
Yes.
And it's the same is true for launching a ranged attack. Normally, you can't launch a ranged attack with a bow or a spear or whatever if you're moving at a gait faster than walking in the core rules.
Yeah.
Like, for example, one of the combat style traits is skirmisher.
It is, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So the reason they put that in is so that you can be running at somebody and throw your spear at them without taking a penalty, as opposed to everybody else. So or fire your sling while you're running up. So this is actually an important thing when you start thinking about ranged combat, and it happened in real life for a reason. People developed ranged weapons so that they could attack their opponents without fear of being hurt themselves. I mean, good idea, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wants that.
100%.
So what the skirmisher combat style trait allows you to do is, if you don't have that trait, and maybe you don't have any ranged weapons at all, you have to run towards the guy who's firing projectiles at you and hope that he doesn't kill you before you get there.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Okay. Yeah.
The skirmisher trait allows you to fire back while you're doing that movement, as long as you're not sprinting. But although it seems like kind of a less sexy combat style trait, for some tactics that
it's really good.
Groups of people might use. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah,
that's right.
And I have to say, I think it's really important about this incidental movement, and this combat is always moving. And I think one of the things I always have to remember, because we use a virtual tabletop and the tokens are there, it sort of like portrays combat almost like to be static, because the tokens are stationary, but it's a constantly moving feast, isn't it? And people are moving left, right, and center, even rotating round, facing in different directions. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. To their credit, the companion rules for tactical combat go a long way to making this more realistic. Really, it is a matter of plain bookkeeping sanity that we try to handle this idea of everything's happening at once. People are moving, people are doing stuff, arrows are whizzing by, axes are being thrown. We have to handle things in a sensible order so that we don't miss the details, miss stuff, which is why we have things like initiative. Yeah. It is literally an ordered list that you're meant to step through step by step. Things may be happening while, initiative type order is being counted through. Yeah. But it's hard to keep track of all that. It's important for the GM, at least, and for every player when it's their turn. It's important to be able to actually make sense of what's going on without trying to see everything at once. It would be very confusing, right?
Yeah, 100%. So just staying with the core rule book, and then I think rather than talking about running and sprinting separately, let's go straight onto the companion, because I think gates are going to be an important part of this. What about, just with the core rule book?
Yes.
What else can we do? What other actions can we do while moving? So, for example, can we take the move action but draw a weapon or reload a bow? Or is that totally not allowed?
That's...
Sorry.
Well, I'll give you the straight answer, and then I'll give you my take on the straight answer.
Nice. Yeah.
So you're allowed to perform one proactive action on your turn.
Yes.
Move is a proactive action. Yeah. So is ready weapon. Therefore, according to what's in the book, strictly speaking, you can't pull your sword while you're running at somebody.
Yes. That's my understanding as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Now, do I think that is correct? No, not really.
Yeah.
So it depends on whether you want to. It depends. The one way to solve that would be to make ready weapon a free action.
Yes. Yeah.
But there are other situations, however, when you might not want it to be a free action. So it's kind of like you need two different things with different names, one of them being a proactive action and one of them being a free action.
Yes.
That ultimately comes down to, you as a GM, what you think is realistic or what works for this particular scene in this particular adventure at your table.
100%. Yeah. And I always felt that, if you imagine two groups of people coming together, initiatives rolled, then the first proactive action in all the turn, everybody's turn is out comes the weapon, they draw the weapon. So much so that I must admit, I now probably say, okay, then assume that your weapons are out. Unless it's surprise or something like that, because otherwise I just think everybody's first proactive action in their turn is going to be draw my weapon, and then we go for the next one. So I tend to sort of like say, oh, your weapons are out, rather than anything else.
This is another, if I can have a side remark. This is another thing that comes up sometimes. It's not written out very clearly in the core book, but it's one of those concepts that I never realized was not obvious until after a long time of reading people's questions online. And that is the game master decides when the combat clock starts.
Correct. Yes, very much so.
So now consider the case where, two parties see each other at opposite sides of a slightly wide field. And they're both going to use melee weapons, and so they both charge each other and close the distance.
Yeah.
If that distance is far enough so that they would both arrive in the center at approximately the same time, and the small differences in movement rates because someone is a better athlete than someone else don't really matter that much. If it's the right distance between them, I guess that's a shorter distance, not a longer distance. But anyway, then I would not start the clock until they were met.
Yes. Yeah.
It gets messier though, because very often ranged weapons will be involved.
100%.
And so if one side is going to be firing arrows at the other side while the other side runs across the field to engage them and make them stop firing arrows, then you probably should start the clock as soon as the people with the ranged weapons, the archers, realize that the other guys are there and moving at them.
Yes, 100%.
Right. And the best way to handle it then maybe is, to say that, all right, you guys are going to have to spend 3 actions on movement to close this distance. And in that amount of time, the archers are going to get, they're firing in volleys. So, 1/3 of them are going to fire now. 1/3 of them are going to fire the second one. 1/3 of them are going to fire the third one. And the first ones will be reloaded by that time, but then you'll be up against them.
Yes.
That's the way I would handle it. Right.
Yeah.
I think that some people maybe have more trouble than that with that kind of a situation. But again, if you were going to spell out every kind of situation that you could imagine, first of all, you'd still miss some.
Yeah, exactly.
Second of all, the rule book would be in the combat chapter would be 100 pages instead of 20 pages or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's some level at which you need to stop when you're writing a book. This is something I have learned very clearly.
Yeah.
There's some level at which you just have to say, this is what I'm going to put down, and everything else they're going to have to figure out, right?
Yeah, and I think that's important because, you know, the rules are guidelines. They're just there. Right. And the GM and players need to come to a decision together how they're going to play it and how it's going to work. And I often see drawing a weapon a bit like a reload, if that makes sense. You know,
yes.
Yes,
in the game I'm writing, they're the same action.
Yeah, you know, it's exactly the same. So I would start the combat clock at different points. You know, if the assassin's, you know, just about to kill somebody or stab somebody who's asleep, then they would make the stab, and then I would start the combat. Right. You know, and so there's different types of combat that would have different clock starts, you know, and I think that comes down to the situation and the GM and the players together. Right. So let's talk about Gait. Because that's something that came in with the companion rule set, which I think is an excellent rule set because it's got my name in it. And that's
well, automatic legitimacy. Yes.
Yeah.
So I want to say one thing about that. Gait is in the core book. It's probably just not called out as a named concept. And we're saying GAIT for those listeners, not GATE. This is not something that swings on hinges.
Oh, yes, of course.
This is how fast you're walking. How fast you're moving. I hadn't thought
about that at all, but yeah, I see the point. Yeah.
So if you were a horse, you'd be talking about things like full gallop and canter and trot. Those are gaits that a horse can adopt, right? If you're talking about people or humanoids, bipeds, the gaits are standing still, which is hold your ground, basically. Yeah. Walking, running, and sprinting.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and also, by the way, there's kind of a gait in between standing still and regular walking, but it's not exactly called out. It's called out in tactical combat a little bit. Like if you're prone and crawling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would call it creeping along.
Yeah.
But anyway, maybe you're sneaking up on somebody and you are on your feet, but you're not moving at a full normal walk. You're creeping along, tiptoeing, right?
Along. Yeah.
Anyway, there's another concept for you. But in the book, there's standing still, hold your ground, and there's walking, running, and sprinting. So every character and every creature, period, has a movement rate, and it is a number like 6 meters.
6 meters, yeah.
It should really be 6 meters per action per round, I guess.
Per round.
It should be 6 meters per round. It's a rate, distance over time. But anyway, it's listed as meters in the book. And humans and human-sized bipeds are 6, right? That's how far. And you can do the experiment in real life. Walk across, a big room and see how far you get in 5 seconds. And the answer will be about 6 meters. It works. It really does.
Yeah. And 5 seconds for people who might be new to the rules, that's how long a round is, a combat round is. Yeah.
Right. That's not how long a cycle is. A cycle is a part of a round. It's less than 5 full seconds in general. But the length of a cycle is poorly defined. You can't say exactly how long a cycle is because each round might have a different number of cycles.
Correct. Yes.
So it's hard to say how long a cycle is. But anyway, that's a subtlety. So if you look up your character's move rate, this is how far they can go in one round at walking speed. Walking speed is the default speed for actually moving as opposed to just standing there.
Yeah.
If you want to run, and when the book says run, they mean like jog or trot for a person.
Yes.
it's 3 times that rate. And a little bit more depending on how good your athletic score is. There's a specific rule for calculating that in the book. And if you want to sprint, that is, Olympic sprinting type stuff, or like if you're an American football player, a wide receiver jumping off the line of scrimmage as fast as they can to go downfield. So that's 5 times your base movement rate.
Yeah.
So that would be 30 meters per round in Mythras language. Again, modified for your athletic score. People who are more athletic go faster.
Faster, yeah.
Right. So those are the distances per round that are meant to inform the GM. Maybe some battlefield is slippery or full of little holes and humps that you have to avoid, or, covered with molasses and you have to go slower or something. Or maybe it's super slippery and you might actually have to make an athletics roll to do this movement instead of just saying my character moves.
Yes.
Right. I mean, there are all these little things that can happen, but
these subtleties,
Yeah. Those are the movement rates and gaits. How's that?
Okay. Sounds good. Right. So the big question is, therefore, do players have to, do they need to announce or choose their gait before the start of the round, or can they switch throughout the round? Right. When do they have to decide whether or not they're walking or running or sprinting in that round?
Right. That is something, again, that's less clearly defined. And again, it's part of the reason that reading the core rules, you might tend to think of combat as rather static.
Yes.
It's because it's kind of like you move and then you fight.
Yes.
And there's a little bit of moving while you're fighting, incidental movement, but you're not going to be taking another move action while you're engaged. While you're engaged in hand-to-hand combat, close combat, you're not going to be taking a move action unless you do something dramatic, like you want to change range, right?
Yeah.
To increase the separation between you, which is the prologue to disengaging completely.
Yeah.
Right. And that requires some dice rolling, which I did a whole Rules Guru segment on already, because that's another thing that people kind of seem to resent about Mythras. And they're, what do you mean I can't just turn and run away? Well, you can try, but it might not work.
Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah. And I like that concept. Yeah.
Right. In old school D&D, they said, if you do that, then your opponent gets a free shot at your back when you go.
They do. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is almost exactly what happens in Mythras too, except that they have an additional choice of staying with you. So that maybe both of you moved a little bit in incidental movement, but you have not broken engagement with them. You don't get that for free unless you win a special effect and choose the special effect, right?
And I really love that. I love that narrative that somebody's trying to back out of combat, but their rolls are not successful. They don't. So the opponent keeps with them as they're sort of like backing up or something like that. So I love that. Yeah.
But that's kind of a side issue there. So while you're engaged, you're going to be mostly standing still. I guess technically you could both have a gait of walking, if that narratively made sense or whatever. But unless it were a very weird, exceptional situation, you're either going to be standing still to going toe to toe, or you're going to be going no faster than a walk.
Right?
Yeah. That is codified a little more clearly in the Mythras companion rules for handling it.
Yeah.
So that's another, like I said, that's another reason why combat seems rather static in core rules, is like you move to meet your opponent, you engage with them, somebody goes down, then you move on to the next opponent.
Move on to the next one.
It's like move, fight, move, fight, move, fight.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that choppy, but that's often what we think about. there is an exception to that is written up clearly in the rules, and that's charge attacks.
Oh, yes.
Right. So in the core book...
Hang on. Before we get to charging, I just want to clarify something. So
Sure.
If my movement for the round is 6 meters, okay, say, for example, I have 2 action points or 3 action points, how much of that 6 meters can I move on my move action? Because that'll be once a turn, won't it? So is that 6 meters divided by the number of action points I have? How does that, because we've established that it's 6 meters for the round, isn't it?
Yes, right. Or 6 times 3 if you're running, or 6 times 5 if you're sprinting, right? And we assume that basically acceleration is instantaneous. You can go from standing still to full sprint in 0 time. We don't try to manage it at that level, right?
Yeah.
So you could say, if you knew that the guy you wanted to fight was 15 meters away and that you were going to have to run to get there, I think you could say, I'm going to sprint for my move action, and then I will be there in 1 action's worth, and I'll be able to engage with that person and fight with them on my next turn, right? My second action point or whatever. I think that is one of the things that is meant to be covered when it says the character can move any distance the game master deems suitable for the situation. In other words, if the game master thinks that you can sprint there for 1 action point's worth and arrive there and actually be able to, swing your sword with your next action point on your next turn, then the game master will let you do that. You have to be sprinting while that happens, but it's doable.
Yes.
Right. So that is how the gates and the movement rates that result from choosing a gate can affect what the game master thinks reasonable for a move. So to answer your question specifically, am I walking half of it my first action and half of it my second action? It really depends on how you're describing what you want to do and how the game master envisions the situation. So the core rule book is meant to give the game master that amount of flexibility. Unfortunately, this confuses the heck out of some people.
Yeah, very much so, including me. I got to say.
I mean, it's fair. I think that going back to first principles of gameplay is a really good way to handle this. At some level, when it's the player's turn, I think the game master should say, and if the player can't come up with it so clearly, the game master should say, tell me what you want your character to do, and I'll tell you what it means.
Yes.
And so, that I want to close with that guy who's on the other side of the long hall and, so that I can fight with him. Yeah. And so the answer there means, well, he's so far away that you need to take a move on this action. But if you sprint over there, you'll be ready to attack him next time. And there's your answer.
Is there any disadvantages to running and sprinting? Because I'm just thinking in my head, if there's no disadvantage to it, I will always sprint because I can cover a huge amount of distance in that. So, because can we sprint and attack therefore, or do we have to use our whole movement action up sprinting? So we won't get that move and engage. I'm testing you now, Matt.
Right. So.
Pause.
I'm trying to resolve this also with the concept of charge attack.
Yes.
If the character starts off by saying, I want to do a charge attack, that makes it very easy because then you use the rules for a charge attack. If he says it differently, like you just did, then the game master has to think a little bit more about what rules.
Yeah.
charge attack works a little differently.
Yeah, because, okay, let's talk about charge then, because and correct me if I'm wrong, to do a charge attack, you have to spend your whole round, the whole of the round, charging.
A charge requires at least one full combat round of movement at running or sprinting speed prior to contact.
Yeah.
There you go. That's correct.
So that would be, say, for example, if the movement is 6 meters, you know, triple that for running would be 18.
It implies you can't do a charge attack on anyone who's closer than 18 meters.
Yeah.
Correct.
And you therefore take the whole round getting there.
Yes.
Isn't it? So,
and when you arrive at the end of the round, that's when your attack happens. Right.
Yes.
So you're essentially spending all of your actions on movement and then getting a buffed attack at the end. That's what you get for spending all your actions. Right.
Yeah.
So that's a charge attack. Sure. And why would anyone do that? You get a penalty on your attack roll. It's 1 grade worse. Right. Yep. So it's harder to hit because you're moving as really fast, but you bump your damage modifier by a step.
Yes.
And if you're riding a horse or a quadruped of some kind, you get to use their damage mod.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And it's stepped up also, by the way. So that can be devastating. I've seen that in action in actual play before. And if someone on a horse charges you and hits you and uses its damage modifier instead of yours, that victim is dead. That's all there is to it. They're skewered.
and just for clarification, you can charge through opponents as well.
Yes, I would have called that charging past contact.
Yes,
instead of charging through contact, because through makes it sound like you're trampling them.
Yes.
Some creatures in the book have the trample ability.
They do.
And that's different. They do 2 times their damage mod when they run you over using presumably running speed or whatever. And so they take movement, they use their athletics or maybe their natural weapons attack on you, and then they do trample damage to you. So that's a special attack for some creatures. There are other hints scattered throughout the book that suggest that any sufficiently large creature should be able to do this to you. But again, they're hints, they're not rules. So
the receiver of the charge can brace. Is that right? Yes. They can brace their weapon. Right. So it would seem, therefore, that the minimum distance for a charge would be 18 meters. Is that right?
Right.
3 times 6.
3 times 6. Yeah. You wouldn't get enough momentum built up in less distance than that to get the bonus that you get from the charge attack. That's my rationale.
And this is when I start to have difficulties with what's going on in the combat, because that almost like charge, those 18 meters, I think have to be split up via the turns, just so I know
where somebody is.
Yes, and in a recent adventure, I had a bear charging through the forest towards the party, but because it was charging a significant distance, it allowed, ranged weapons to be fired off.
Right.
As it was still charging. And so I needed to know distances. So I just sort of like took their charge, their 18 meters, for example, thought, they have 2 action points. So they do 9 and 9.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me.
You know,
I have no problem with that. That is not written down. Because, for example, in the first example we talked about, you could get there if you weren't using a charge attack, right? If the player didn't declare a charge attack and just said, I want to run up, I want to close the distance and do a normal attack, then we said they could use sprinting and be there with one movement spend, right?
yes.
But they simply wouldn't get the bonus of charging. They would be standing still, accelerate instantly to sprinting speed, decelerate instantly at the other end like a cartoon character, and then swing their sword standing motionless, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
they wouldn't get the bonus momentum and the increase of the size of their weapon and the increase in their damage mod that you would get in a charge attack. So you're not using the charge rules. They don't get the advantages, but also maybe they could accomplish it in one go, right?
Yes. And
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. But the fact that this is an awkward thing about the rules, there's this very nice system, in many ways, very nice system of cycles within a round. And it's a terminology thing to some extent, but the idea of having a unit of combat smaller than a round is, kind of peculiar to this game. Usually the round is the smallest unit of combat. And I think that terminology difference, in addition to the conceptual difference, confuses a lot of people when they first start Mythras.
Yeah, 100%.
So what's smaller than a round? What are you even talking about? Well, the answer is it's because you have proactive and reactive actions, et cetera, and these action point things. So the action point economy works very well for some things, but then these rules for the charge attack suddenly have you spending for a whole round instead of spending individual actions, even though the move action is meant to be one action, right?
Yes.
In the normal action point economy. So the fact that this is happening over the course of a whole round instead of individually reckoned cycles is an exception. It's weird and it's an exception. And so it's no surprise that you have to scratch your head and say, oh yeah, where is this character standing now while everyone else is functioning in cycles, even though they've declared they're going to spend their whole round moving.
Yeah. And what I hope is happening, I think it's really important to just sort of like discuss these rules like we're doing now. And then sort of like that lets people see that. I mean, in the end, it's personal interpretations, isn't it? And, you decide what works for your table or your game.
But that's not an excuse for writing books that confuse people.
Yeah, because I have a real bee in my bonnet about charge. Okay. And this is just something that I have to come to terms with, because what I feel is that if I've got two actions, I can run 18 meters in two actions and charge. If I've got 3 action points, can you see?
It costs you more. It costs you more than some other dude who has 2 action points. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's totally unfair.
And I just sort of like think, well, that really does not sit nicely with me, if that makes sense, because I'm sort of like thinking, if I've got 2 action points, I'm moving 9 meters, then 9 meters, to get my charge in for the round. But if I've got 3 action points, I'm doing 6, and then my final 6, and it's just sort of like feels.
Yeah.
The only advantage, and this is only from playing, by the time you get there with your final 6, because you've got 3 action points, everybody else has tend to run out of action points, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So you won't get attacked when you arrive. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
You know, and even if they're delaying their action and they've only got 2 action points, they've used them up before that final turn. Yeah.
So you may get a free shot at them, so to speak, where they don't have an action point to spend in defense and they fail their roll automatically.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of thing.
If we're not using charge, okay, well, so I think that's a really good explanation of charge, and I find it quite specific in the book. There's that huge round, and it's building up that momentum and doing harder to hit somebody at the end of your charge, but doing a nice damage increase. You know, if everything is successful. But if we're sprinting, if we're using our move action to sprint, that's a huge amount of distance, isn't it? Because that's 5 times. Is that right?
30 meters.
Yeah. You know, and that seems to be a huge amount of distance to take in one turn. That's right, isn't it?
Right. Well, again, that's for a round. The movement rate times 5 is movement rate per round times 5.
So they would have to separate.
You'd have to break it up a little bit. Yeah. That's when the GM says, well, you know, they're 15 meters away and you could do that in 1 action's worth. That's a judgment call, kind of.
Yeah. And then that would be it then.
Right. Then you would still have actions to spend afterwards, unlike a charge attack. Yeah.
Yeah, that it would be. I sometimes just feel it might be easier just to sprint up to somebody and hit them rather than charging with them. That's logically, that it sounds much better just to sprint up. I can take a longer distance. I have a standard hit, I presume, at the end of it. Can I sprint and hit at the end of my sprint? Because I'm moving and engaging.
I think the answer is no.
I think it's no as well.
You spend your action on movement. If the person that you're running up on has not taken their turn yet in the round, then they will be able to attack you while you're engaged, and you'll be able to defend.
Yeah.
And that's not totally unsensible to me. It's a risk anytime you get involved in combat. On the other hand, if this is a person who has already gone before you in the round, then they've already spent their attack or their proactive action, and they can't attack you until the cycle comes round again. At which point, we just said they're going first before you. So then they will get to do it then. The same thing will just happen later in time.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens. Sometimes life is like that.
I tend to say that if people are walking, you can engage at the end of it. Well, I tend to say if you're running or sprinting, that's going to take your whole move action up.
Right. This comes again from the idea of incidental movement. Like, I might not be within weapon reach of you, and therefore I might not be engaged with you, even if we both have spears, right? Long spears. Maybe we're farther away than either of us can touch the other. But, you know, if I took 3 steps, maybe that would be sufficient. Do I need to spend a move on that? No. It's just step and attack.
Yes.
That's part of the attack roll. You don't have to spend movement on that. If it's a really long distance, according to the GM's judgment, that's when you need to spend on movement. And you will arrive there, and that person will be able to hit you before you can hit them. But I mean, you know, that's part of life. That's okay to me.
And it might be, you know, because you're moving, it might be harder to hit you. You know, people firing arrows at you will find it harder if you're sprinting, won't they, as you sprint past.
Right.
So one of the things that which is not technically moving, but because we play on a virtual tabletop, I always have to remind players that when 2 tokens are in combat, reach, and I think you've done something, you've done a rules guru about reach, haven't you? I'm sure you have. If not, Matt, it'd be a wonderful one to do. When they're touching, there's reach comes into play if there's two steps different between the it's not as if your token is 5 meters away. I always assume that they're engaged, and then that's it. So
if you're using a grid, I would say that to be engaged in close combat, the two tokens have to be in adjacent squares.
Yes,
and whether you call touching on a corner, on a point, whether you call that in adjacent, I would, but maybe that's up to you. Definitely sharing a side is adjacent. Sharing a corner, maybe that's adjacent too. I think it is.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that goes back to what you decide at your table. One thing that we hinted about right at the beginning was combat specials. Are there any combat specials? We talked about combat traits like skirmish and how that affects it. Are there any combat specials that are linked to movement in any way?
The ones for opening and closing range, of course, and for withdraw, which is for fleeing combat entirely. I'm trying to think if there are any other offhand. I don't think there are any others off.
I think the other one that is outmaneuvering.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, which I think is very good when you're attacking. I often see that like in a barroom brawl or something like that. There's multiple opponents, and you can use outmaneuver to reduce the number of attacks that are actually going to hit you. I often think about it like somebody shoves a table. In action films, they push a table and so they can't attack or something like that.
That's right.
Wow.
And that can be very fun.
Yeah. Who would have thought movement in combat was so complicated?
Well, if you read the Discord, you would think so, yes. We haven't even talked about the companion. Do you want to?
Yes.
A short version?
Yes, let's do the short version of the companion. Yeah, go for it.
The short version of the companion's tactical combat is movement is no longer an action that you take in combat. Movement comes for free, and it happens all the time. So there's this sense of dynamic combat instead of static.
Yeah, nice.
And so the flow of combat goes determine initiative, do any bookkeeping, like if somebody has ongoing effects from being stunned or something like that.
Bleed or something like that.
Bleed, yeah. And then do the action phase. And the action phase is in cycles. So you do your first cycle of action, and then you do movement after the first cycle. Then you do the second cycle. Then you do movement. Then you do the third cycle. Then you do until you're done, right? And so what you have to do when you take this approach instead, where you're not paying for movement, is you have to declare explicitly what you're allowed to do when you're moving and what you're not allowed to do when you're moving, or put another way, how fast you're allowed to be moving for every given action, whether it's proactive or reactive or a free action. So now, starting on page 3 of that chapter in the companion, every one of the combat actions from Mythras is reprinted, and it tells you straight up in every case what the movement restrictions are. Like for attack, it says movement restrictions. The character may move at a gait no faster than a walk if moving into engagement range or making a ranged attack. The exception is the rules for charging, page 104. They redid the charging rules for this game too, so that there's technically no minimum distance that you need to make a charge attack, which frankly, from a physics point of view, is kind of BS, but it is a very useful abstraction because it cures what you were objecting to, basically, about charge attacks spending a whole round, and you have to be a certain distance away if you're going to be running for a whole round, that kind of consideration. It fixes that. So it's not so bad. It's not so bad.
Yeah.
It's at least it fixes something. That's good. And so then they very specifically talk about the gaits of holding ground, walking, running, and sprinting.
And those are declared, aren't they?
Yes, you need to declare
on,
that. You need to declare that during your first cycle action.
Yes.
Right.
And,
I'm sorry. When you do the movement after your first cycle action, it says at the end of the first cycle, each character in initiative order chooses a movement gait: hold ground, walk, run, sprint.
Yeah.
The characters then move up to half of the allowed distance in order of speed. Blah 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 blah. So there's a whole explanation there.
Yeah.
On page
and that's sort of like. To me, that almost like develops the system. I always feel that the core rules is quite a basic system that works, and I often think, if you're starting off, just be sensible. That I think is what the core rules are saying. So there's not, it's not, you mentioned it earlier on, Matt, when you said if everything had to be accounted for, the rule book would be thousands of pages. And then I think the companion comes along and says, okay, then let's take this a little bit further if you wish, and it gives another level to it. I think with that tactical combat, it's a bit like, and I think this was also in classic fantasy. It talks about tokens, figures, and lines of sight, and and facing and things like that in the companion. Yeah.
In that sense, it says in the beginning of the section in the companion, it says you could even adopt these rules if you weren't using a grid, and I totally see that. Again, the main conceptual difference is that movement is something that happens in addition to all your combat actions. You don't have to pay for it with combat actions. You simply have to declare and move at the appropriate times in the round. And it cures a lot of the questions that you had about where is this figure at this point during the round.
Yes.
Can someone else get an opportunity attack on them or something like that just because they're running by, right? Or who can see this person, at this point? Maybe they've gone past a corner and someone suddenly can see them and change their plans for the rest of the round. Yeah.
I do quite like the idea that movement is removed from the action point ecosystem. I do quite like that because I see action points very much connected to combat, physically hitting or parrying or casting spells. But I sort of think, everybody can move 6 meters, or everybody can do running, I think if you're more athletic, you can run further. That's in the rules. But sometimes I sort of I've only got 2 actions, so I'm, move this in 2 actions, and then I'm sort of stopped, and then that's it. So I think it has its benefits, but I don't know what you think, but I just think find a system that works for you, that everybody agrees with, and then play it. What's your thoughts, Matt? Sorry, rule guru.
That's more like it. Now that you've struck the properly deferential tone. I have sympathy for people who read the rule book expecting to find rules that make sense to them to use and play, because that's what the rule book is for. It's to show you how to play within a certain self-consistent system. So I have sympathy for people who look at a rule book and struggle with what they see there, or find something missing or not feeling right. It's easy to say you should find the system that works for you, but I think it's certainly easier to choose from several options. And so it's really good that the companion presents another clear option for you, instead of you having to imagine that option and then write it in Mythras language so that it makes sense with the other rules.
100%. Yeah. And if you really want a nightmare for movement in combat, play Destined with a speedster. Then, then you have some really, especially since I think they can use power points to hit people as they move, roundabout as well. Right. It's quite impressive. So thank you so much. What would be your parting words about movement in combat for any new or experienced GMs and players?
If you want better clarity, use the movement rules in the companion.
Yep.
If you're using theater of the mind combat and you are comfortable with the idea of being able to identify a situation that doesn't make sense and say, oh, well, that's not how that's going to work. You're going to move and then you can attack next time. Or you don't need to pay for that with movement. I'll give you that. If you're comfortable as a GM and your players are comfortable with that too, so that you don't fight about it.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable with that, then the core rules will work fine. I played Mythras for many years, just using the core rules, sometimes using a gridded map, sometimes just using theater of the mind. And, I never had any problems figuring out what should happen. And my players never complained that I should be able to do this or that. So, I guess I had it rather easy compared to some people. The usual caution exists. It's easy to study the rules, to analyze them, and if you're an analytical thinker, to try to poke holes in them with edge cases and exceptions.
100%, yeah.
That's fine. It's an interesting exercise, and it might be important to do while you're trying to learn the system. But, realize that maybe the rules aren't perfect, or maybe the way the rules was written isn't perfect and doesn't quite explain it right. So it meant to say something, but it's not quite getting the point across.
Yeah.
Don't base your whole assessment of the movement and combat rules or any other piece of the rules based on a bunch of white room thinking edge cases that, gotta be honest, probably are never going to come up.
Never. Yeah.
Ranged attacks and people running at archers is going to happen in real life. Charge attacks are going to happen in real life. So if you don't understand those, that's a legitimate complaint, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't sit there trying to break the system and then saying, aha, when you figure out a way to break it.
Yes.
That's kind of unfair. Ideally, any rule set won't break even when you try your hardest to do that. But come on, who's that good? How many authors are that good? Maybe no.
Yeah.
I don't blame based on that kind of stuff.
No, and I think it's like what you were saying before. There's this. Everyone's there to have fun.
Right.
And that's the important aspect. So don't get too bogged down with all the, tape measures and movement. Just think about it and use maybe common sense. Yeah,
right. So that's another interesting thing. A lot of us play on virtual tabletops now, not at a table. Try using a map with no grid.
Yeah.
And see if that changes the way that you approach the game a little. A lot of these tools, virtual tabletops have a tool where you can measure a distance
They do, yeah.
If
or
you
the
want
one
to.
we do, yeah.
Right. So if you really want to get into the nitty gritty and see how far away something is, you can measure it, but you're not confronted with that idea that this is the box I'm standing in. I can go 4 boxes. Maybe that'll be a little bit of a liberating experience if you try it.
I tend not to use grids just because I find it difficult to align them if there's a grid already on the map. So I just go gridless all the time, which I enjoy. I think it makes, I think once you put a grid on, it takes away some of the feel of the environment. So I tend not to put them on and let just go.
Right. Some of these battle maps are so beautiful, and then you put a grid on them and it kind of spoils the aesthetic.
Yeah, it certainly does. Thank you so much for coming along, Matt, Rule Guru. I'll give you your proper title. And I learn something new every time you come along. So I look forward to the Discord encouraging you to come back on with your next rules in the future. I have no idea what it'll be, but it will always be insightful. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Glad to.
And that's it. Another episode of Mythras Matters completed. Don't forget you can check out all my content by following my YouTube channel and the campaign areas on World Anvil. And if you would like to support me further, then check out my digital adventures, encounters and fanzine, all available for download on my Ko-fi page. So until next time, have a great month of gaming, and I will chat to you all again in January. Until then, I hope that all your opposed roles succeed and provide you with a well-deserved special. Thanks for listening, everyone, and have a wonderful Christmas. See you all later. Bye. The content of this podcast is covered by the Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license, so please give appropriate credit if you are sharing or copying any part of this podcast. Thank you. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please could you go along and press the subscribe button. I'm really trying to work towards 2,000 subscribers, so your support will really matter. Oh, and by the way, in December, I'll have a birthday. I will be 59. Yes, just one more year of working before I retire. Yeah. Have a wonderful Christmas, everyone. And thank you if you're one of the true faithful ones who have got to this part in the podcast. Have a great Christmas, everyone. See ya. Bye.